I'm so excited about today's guest. Tero Isokauppila is the founder and CEO of Four Sigmatic, a functional foods company that wants to make the world's most studied, most nutrient-dense foods more delicious and easier to consume by bringing healthy upgrades into people's daily routine. And Danielle Broida is a key player in the worldwide mushroom movement as a registered herbalist, nutritionist, and instructor of mycology, and the head of education at Four Sigmatic. Danielle is teaching the world about the importance of a life on functional mushrooms. Together, they're debunking misinformation behind the trend and breaking down the research and history of adaptogens. Their new book, Healing Adaptogens, the definitive guide to using super herbs and mushrooms for your body's restoration, defense, and performance, is out now, and it is the textbook for all things adaptogens. And today we are going to dive into the best of the best, how they work, and why and how you should be using them daily. All right, Tero and Danielle, I've been so excited for this interview because, like I said before the podcast, I feel like you put adaptogens on the map at Four Sigmatic. Prior to you guys, it was rhodiola and ashwagandha were the only two I had heard about. They were in pill form given by functional MDs, and it felt like voodoo. So I'm so excited to be unpacking and demystifying adaptogens and kind of talking about your background, how you got into it, and giving people the resources to start using them in their lives, because nature is medicine and you've helped us all, access it. So thank you for that.
Thanks for having us on. We're excited to chat all things adaptogen, but also obviously give people tons of actionable stuff for health and wellness and all things you can do.
Absolutely.
Be a better version of yourself.
Definitely. Well, let's start with you, Tero. What was the impetus of starting Four Sigmatic? Like, how did you start your wellness journey?
Yeah. So I grew up in Finland, hence the funny name and slight accent. And I grew up on a family farm that we've had now for 13 generations, so at least since 1619. And my dad was an agronomist, and my mom taught physiology and anatomy. And I grew up with a lot of this Nordic wellness wisdom that was not trendy 20, 30 years ago, but now saunas and cold plunges and wild berries and rhodiola and chaga and things that are of all the rage. And then I studied chemistry and nutrition myself. And a couple of my friends who I played soccer with became professional athletes. They were way better than I was, like a really young age. They went to the top clubs in Europe. And I started coaching nutrition over 20 years ago. And around that time, I came across adaptogens, particularly for sports performance. And I'd also had deep history with mushrooms before. And around that same time, I won an innovation award for discovering this rare mushroom with my friend. And that's the story. So about 20 years of formally with fungi and adaptogen, but obviously learning from my mom at young age about nettle and rhodiola and then the culinary mushrooms, the chanterelles and the boletes. But formally, it's been a 20-year journey now, and I got into it through sports nutrition mostly.
Wow, that's so fascinating. So when you were little, was your mom giving you adaptogens, not just culinary mushrooms?
Yeah, or they were not called adaptogens. I guess the name is 7 years old, and I guess it existed, but she didn't call it. It was just natural healing. So I was a kind of professional Boy Scout all through my childhood, and the people I was in the Boy Scout groups with, their mom was maybe the most famous herbalist in all of Scandinavia, and she has this very famous line of herbal essences and also some adaptogens. So we were just called herbs or herbs and mushrooms, and they were not really called adaptogens at that point, and it was just part of like holistic living. And it was like the nettle tea and the dandelion and the thing, like very hippie, so to say. And but I was more interested in stuff later that would be more like evidence-based, and that's where I think the love for adaptogens came, because we can go into the definition in a bit. But unlike a word like superfood that means nothing, adaptogen is actually science-based, evidence-based, and it's rooted in Western research, even though ingredient itself has been used for hundreds or thousands of years by various indigenous cultures. So it was like a fun marriage of my hippie childhood and interest in science.
Wow. I mean, I'm a little bit jealous, and that sounds really fascinating. I wish that I was in Girl Scouts with her or something like that. I think it's called Adventure Guides now. It was previously called Indian Princesses. It's obvious why they changed the name, but that sounds really, really fun. And also a soccer player. I didn't know we had this much in common, Tero. So can you talk about the mushroom that you found, that you identified as, and how old were you when this happened?
Yeah, it was a total accident slash joke. So it's called matsutake. Japanese name is matsutake. Take means mushroom. So you might have heard shiitake, maitake. And it is like very prestigious culinary mushroom for the Japanese people. At that time, only thought to grow in one island in Japan, in the northern island, Hokkaido. Now it's been discovered, its kind of cousin, sister species have been discovered at different parts of the world. And then my friend who grew up in the same area as me, her mom was in the Forest Institute, and we knew that there was this world's largest gravel hill where I grew up. Like literally, I went to a school that kind of an environmental school that my great grandfather helped to found. And I knew it was like identical ecosystem as in the Hokkaido because we always learned about that and pine trees and the soil. So it was like a joke. Like at that point, we didn't know that it was a reality. And we heard that there was this competition where you could get money. And I was like, whatever, 18, 19. And I was like, oh, great. And then went on to this rabbit hole and it ended up being true. And this mushroom was found. And I think University of Helsinki still manage this program. And since then, other matsutake species have been discovered around the world.
Wow, it's like it was meant to be from such a young age that you would
I guess so.
make this mainstream for all of us. Oh, so cool. And so, Danielle, how did you fit into the Four Sigmatic family? What's your background?
Yeah, so grew up on the opposite side of the world. I grew up in Southern California and had an affinity towards really the earth from a very early age. So my mom was brewing kombucha before it was ever in a bottle, and it was doing beach cleanups, but in LA and very, very different than Finland. And so that was kind of the common thread through my story, was this connection to the earth. And I explored all different avenues before I landed where I am today, where I lived in intentional communities and did permaculture design. I did large scale industrial composting. I'd get like vats of 10,000 worms at a time and try to create and change the waste stream. And I ended up moving to Asia. So I lived in Thailand and I was leading backpacking trips. So similar to what used to be Indian princesses, taking high schoolers, 14 to 18-year-olds out into the backcountry. And we'd backpack to 3 different hill tribe villages and very immersed into the lifestyle. So no running water, no toilet paper. We were foraging and hunting for food. And it was there where I became really fascinated with herbal medicine. And in all these other chapters that I had been studying, there was a connection to the earth, whether it was natural building or gardening or rainwater catchment or composting. But there was this missing component of when we get sick, what do we turn to? And out there would go and forage fiddlehead ferns and find different mushrooms. I went mushroom hunting for the first time with a host mom in India. And so I spent about 3 years leading these trips and living out there. And I came back to the States to formalize my studies and go to grad school for herbal medicine in Boulder, Colorado. And I opened a private practice. It was kind of the guided path. And a lot of natural practitioners have a similar story, but I had no idea what kind of people would show up at my door. And it was pretty much the same story of, hey, I've tried every other practitioner. You're my last resort. Like, this is my last stop. And it brought a lot of autoimmunity, a lot of chronic illness, misdiagnosed diseases, or people that said, no one believes that anything's wrong with me, but I experience all these symptoms. There's just not a name for it. And I started specializing in functional mushroom-based treatment. So I would make all my own medicine for my clients, individualized personal formulas. And the functional mushrooms were the safest, most effective option for this huge range of bodies of all sorts of immune deficiency or overactive immunity. And so I just fell in love with the functional mushrooms, but I really wanted to offer them in the herbal way, in the ancient way. So from the forest, extracted in this certain way. And I was like giving my clients full chunks of reishi mushroom and like, hey, you're going to put this in a pot and boil it for these several hours and you're going to strain it. And they're like, Danielle, I can hardly get out of bed. I'm not making my own reishi decoction all night. Like, what else is there? And a big thing for me is, and Tero too, but is tasting the medicine. This is part of the herbal tradition. And so, as you mentioned, at the time I started doing this, the only other options were like pills and capsules. And I actually found Four Sigmatic in my private practice, looking for an easier way to offer the medicine into my clients' protocols. And yeah, joined forces with Tero. It's been almost 5 years, which is wild, and have worn all sorts of hats and really on a similar path of how can we make these ancient allies, I think of them as allies, as friends, more accessible to people that really need their benefits and maybe don't know they even exist.
Well, it's first of all, your backstory is amazing. It's just so interesting the way people's lives kind of meander and they find themselves, meeting the right people and needing something and someone's answering a need, and that was Tero for you and your patients. Kind of shocking to me is looking back, whereas Tero, you have such a rich history. Being from Southern California, I don't know if you feel this way, Danielle, but I feel like I had zero access to ancient medicine or traditions, from acupuncture to herbs to there's eons, it feels like, of science and practice that we just don't use here in the States. It's like, go to your doctor, get a pharmaceutical, wipe out your gut, not get the answers you need, not get to the root cause. And functional MDs are doing that, in that they are using diagnostics and getting to the root cause of the problem, but they may only be using, some do use adaptogens, but may only be using a multivitamin, some omega-3s, some protocol that will definitely help. But I feel like there's so much knowledge that it's a whole nother world. So you've helped us. I don't know if people know that the reason why I'm interviewing you both is because you have this amazing new book that's going to break it down for everyone about all the adaptogens. But I think we need to just start at the history of adaptogens. What are adaptogens? How long have they been used? I mean, they're a little bit confusing. So I want to break it down for people so that they have that knowledge that I didn't have and still don't. I wouldn't call myself an expert.
Yeah, let's break it down. Adaptogens have been used far before the name adaptogen was coined. So as Tero was alluding to, the name is only 70 years old. It's from the Latin adaptere, which means to fit or to adjust, right? To adapt. And there are about 20 to 30 species that are formally considered adaptogen. Many of them are plants. There's about 5 of them that are mushrooms, and they all have 3 things in common. So they're all non-toxic, meaning that they're safe to take every day. So there isn't a load where you experience a toxic effect or an overdose. They're all normalizing, which is really interesting. So they're working on multiple organ systems at the same time, and almost like a bath or a shower of an incredible amount of nutrients replenishing the system. And they're all non-specific, which is what I think trips people up a little bit, especially through our Western lens. We're so used to a pill for an ill, right? Taking something to experience a direct benefit. And adaptogens don't work that way. They are basically, every body that ingests them might have a different reaction to them. And so they're working with our body, right? They're adjusting, they're adapting. And this non-specific nature is what makes them so powerful. So they can either be the same reishi mushroom, for example, based on the state of your body when you meet and start taking that reishi tea, for example. You might feel more stimulated. It might raise your vitality after taking for a few days, or perhaps you might feel more relaxed. Your nervous system is downregulated and supported in that way. So we have this kind of bi-directional action happening, both on, it can be on the nervous system, on the immune system, on multiple different systems in the body. And so, yeah, really, really powerful tool, especially at this time. They're so relevant in this time in our lives where we're so stressed and we're looking for really powerful, there's several thousand herbs that we use for medicine. And this group of 20 or 30 species are among the most phytochemically complex. So there's so much going on. They're whole, real, synergistic beings that work with our bodies to deliver us kind of what we're needing in the moment, which is pretty cool. Tero, you can expand on that too.
Yeah, maybe I would say is like, when you start to go into anything evidence-based, it can become very scary very quickly. You start to go to PubMed, read articles, you see charts, there's abbreviations of words you've never heard of. And this could be not just with herbs, but like look at insulin response or metabolic health. And then you're like, oh, I don't know what to do. So what I would say is what's great about adaptogens is, although you can go to that rabbit hole and go deep into them, they are, by definition, very safe and non-toxic. So there's like the risk that you're playing with house money. Secondly, they have been used in every corner of the world as kind of the top herb or fungi for generation after generation after generation. So hundreds, if not thousands of years, depending on which one we're talking about. So generation after generation elevated them to become the top herb or fungi of their corner. So these 20 to 30 that we know today come literally from every corner of the world. So they're the top players of each corner of the world. And funny enough, often they are also the top thing from their family. So it'd be the cherry family, and we have the top cherry. We got the pea family, and the top one from there. So like in a way, they're also evolutionary, chosen to be the all-stars. And you don't have to like know 50 things or even these 20 to 30 things. Like if you learn 2 of them and incorporate them into your life, they're a very safe and versatile way to reap health benefits. So I would say that just the reassurance, because in a way we all want evidence-based, science-backed, legit things, because in health and wellness, there is so much confusion, there is so much marketing, and you want that. But then when you go there, it becomes scary and overwhelming and hard to understand. So I think that's why adaptogens are great, for their safety, for their like every corner of the world and every family. You get the best of the best, so you don't have to know that much.
Yeah, the safety and history definitely makes you feel calm and at ease about starting to incorporate them. I think the non-specification and that it works on every part of your system is so confusing to me as exactly like a pill for an ill. I'm like, okay, I know what a proton pump inhibitor does. It's going to shut off someone's acid, and I know what the side effects that might be down the line. And like, there are things that are clear to me in the science. And so I think, like most of my podcasts, I love to give people the 101. I'd love to dive into the 5 fungi and what they do, because I think picking one then becomes hard if it's non-specific, because you're like, well, then do I pick chaga or rhodiola or ashwagandha? Or, you kind of end up down this rabbit hole where there may be paralysis by analysis because you don't really understand it. So I know people can, first of all, I got to give a plug to your book, because Healing Adaptogens is out, and it's like the first textbook for something like this. But let's dispel some of it here today.
Yeah, let me just set the stage, and then Danielle can jump into each one of them for an overview. But for sure, like I wish 20 years ago this book would have existed. That's partly why I wrote it. And I wrote my previous book, Healing Mushrooms, was the same thing. I came to the US. I think you met with one of my business partner in Santa Monica in like 2014, 15. And like, there wasn't knowledge about mushrooms like there is today. And that's why I wanted to write the book with Danielle and make a book that is a reference point where you can use your body type and figure out what you want. So try to make it more accessible. At the same time, I would say is there is a risk with anything in life, including anything health and wellness, is this fear to be perfect. And I would just want to also dispel that. And we can talk about the methods of action if you want to talk about how these compounds do, how they are non-specific and how they are able to affect multiple body parts, because there is a method of action. It's just more versatile. But what I would just dispel is like, hey, like if you start any new hobby, you're not going to be perfect on day one or whatever. So it's a journey. And because of the safety, I would just encourage you to add biodiversity, not just with the adaptogens, but with everything, like more spices to your diet, more herbs. Like instead of eating the 10 to 20 things year round, have seasonality, have stuff, and experiment. And I think herbs and spices are a really fun way to do it in culinary ways, but also these adaptogens, and start adding them to stuff and start the process. But there is a way how you can also find the one for you faster. And I'll let Danielle jump in there with the mushrooms.
Yeah. So when we're talking about the 5 functional mushrooms that are also adaptogens, there's a commonality among all of them, which will kind of riff off of what we've been talking about. And we can get a little bit into, and then we can go deeper if we want, about how these are actually working within the system. So all of these 5 fungi have a similar compound in them. It's a polysaccharide, so many sugars, a polysaccharide complex sugar chain. The type in these mushrooms are called 1316 beta D-glucans. You don't have to remember that, but essentially all of these 5 fungi share that same compound. And so what this compound is doing, it works in the gut and is immunomodulating. This is why it was so relevant in my private practice. So literally, we think of this like cruise control for the immune system. So they have the ability to either stimulate someone's immune cells if, for example, you're immune compromised or you're immune deficient, or in the case of autoimmune bodies where there's too much immune activity, and the Western approach is to put these people on immunosuppressants, so then they're super weak and vulnerable to all sorts of antigens. These functional mushrooms can downregulate immune activity, so B cells, T cells, natural killer cells, without pushing that body into a state of depletion. So it really is like this cruise control for the immune system. So they all have this in common. They're all supportive to the immune system. They're all adaptogens, so we can think of that as supporting the stress response. But just like the 3 of us, for example, we all have certain things in common, right? We're in health and wellness and love talking about mushrooms and weird roots for a living. But we all offer something unique into the world, right? We have like our thing. And similar with these 5 mushrooms. So they all share that beta glucan, that immunomodulation, that stress supportive activity. And yet they each have these additional compounds that give them a unique action in the world and in our bodies. And so that's a really helpful way to say, okay, I want to start with reishi or lion's mane, for example. So these 5 that I'll touch on that we mentioned in the book and go a lot deeper are reishi. We've got to start with the queen. Reishi is literally referred to as the queen of mushrooms. It's the #1 species. So all plants, all fungi, all other deer antlers, and all the other ingredients they use in traditional Chinese medicine, reishi is the #1 superior tonic. And you're like, Tero and I almost felt repetitive in the book because each species were like, this was the most revered. This was the most revered. This is the most sacred. But truly, in all the different parts of the world that they were used in, these were the creme de la creme. And we call reishi our really premier stress support. There's so much more going on with cardiovascular health and, our heart health, but really think of it, reishi as amazing nervous system support without being sedative. So a lot of times when we want to relax our nervous system, we have this direct sedative, but again, there's a non-specific activity. So think of reishi as long-term stress support. So we'll start with that. And then on the opposite side, we have chaga, which Tero grew up drinking chaga tea. Chaga is our king of mushrooms, grows on birch trees in Finland, in Scandinavia, in Russia. And chaga, super unique. It is full of antioxidant properties. It's the most antioxidant rich food on the planet. It also contains melanin, an interesting antioxidant, superoxide dismutase, SOD. So really, when we think about replenishing the system with antioxidants. We need that for so many areas of life, right? They're fighting free radicals, which are released when we age, when we exercise, and we're exposed to the sun. So really kind of our premier immune support, with the secondary benefit of skin health with chaga. We have lion's mane, really popular functional mushroom, super unique ability to work on our nervous system, specifically with cognitive health. So lion's mane is our one adaptogen that's also a nootropic. So great for focus and memory, cognition. We can get into the compounds and what's actually making this happen if we want.
Let's do it.
Okay, so in lion's mane, there's two identified compounds. They're called the hiracinones and erinacines. And what they do is they activate, it's called nerve growth factor. And so when we think about activating this NGF, think of it like a light switch turning on our body's ability to fire and connect neurons. And we see that happening everywhere in the body, not just, well, in the brain as well. It's kind of what it's most touted for. So, research with neurodegeneration, things like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, dementia, really being able to activate and connect neural tissue. But that nerve regeneration happens everywhere. So I used to actually work with lion's mane with athletes that have had irreversible nerve damage in other areas of their body, with great results using a lion's mane extract. So kind of nicknamed like the nerve mushroom. Super cool.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why it's unique, so there's adaptogens that I started with, like the ginseng, the cordyceps, the rhodiolas, that I would give to athletes for athletic performance. Why, when I first came across lion's mane, I actually talked to the biggest mushroom producer in the US, and they said nobody wants this mushroom. It's like literally we do one batch a year and that's it. It's not popular. And I was obsessed with it and wanted it to be one of the cornerstones of Four Sigmatic. And the main reason was that it offered one unique thing that almost no natural or isolated substance does, and it's an ability to penetrate the blood-brain barrier. So we have these barriers in body. Blood-brain barrier is there to protect toxins mostly from entering the brain, because brain is sacred. The negative of that is that it's hard to get nutrients to the brain, besides glucose and some unwanted isolated substances such as heroin or opiates. Very few things can enter the brain, which means the brain is safe, but also brain and cognition related issues can start decades before you get symptoms, because you slowly are just deprived of nutrients. So what lion's mane can do is deliver these nutrients into the brain and these myelin sheaths, and we can get all nerdy on what they do. And at the same time, we have to acknowledge that brain and nervous system are the frontier of current research. So 10, 20 years ago when I started, there wasn't as much knowledge about the brain and the nervous system as there is today. We knew a lot about muscles and organs and blood circulation because we've studied it for hundreds of years. But the brain and the nervous system are kind of the current, and that and gut health maybe, are current kind of frontiers where every year we're getting new research on those things. But I just wanted to highlight that you can take a lot of things for sports performance, but you can take very, very, very few things to penetrate the blood-brain barrier. So I think that's why lion's mane is so unique.
Well, I've actually been drinking lion's mane coffee from Four Sigmatic for not since 2014. Whenever you came out with the ground coffee, my husband's always a little freaked out because he doesn't actually like culinary mushrooms. And I'm like, you won't taste it. It's not, he's like, is it the mushroom coffee? And I'm like, yes, get on board. But tell me about the myelin sheath and what happens when it goes through and passes over the blood-brain barrier.
Danielle, you want to go or me? You go.
Well, just with these two compounds that we mentioned, they're actually light enough to penetrate that barrier. So as Tero mentioned, there's few things that can penetrate the barrier because it's this protection around the brain tissue. And so when we have that activity of the activation, the turning on of this nerve growth hormone, the NGF, that happens both within the blood-brain barrier as well as throughout the rest of the nervous system. So that's this really unique ability that just lion's mane can do. Which gives it kind of its cognitive power, its neuroregeneration activity, very unique from not only other functional mushrooms, other herbal medicines, but even within the world of pharmaceutical cognitive medicine, we don't have that activity or substances that are able to do that. So it kind of stands on its own in this way.
Definitely. All right. So number 4.
Number 4, we'll go with cordyceps.
Okay.
Tero, you'll have to chime in because Tero has a deep love for cordyceps through sports performance and being an athlete himself, but it's really been touted like the athlete mushroom. It's been used. Each of these has a several 1,000-year-old history, and the stories around their ancient use and the anecdotal use is so fascinating. But cordyceps is found in the Himalayas, so above 14,000 feet in elevation. And a lot of times where these ingredients grow actually gives us information about what they might be doing for our bodies or their benefits. And so the story with cordyceps is really relevant to the modern day use case where these Sherpas, these mountain climbers, would go up in the early spring to herd their yaks. These like big hairy yaks. They go up to the high elevations and they notice their yaks were munching on these little things in the ground. They almost look like insects. And instantly the yaks would go into heat. So these Sherpas are like, we have all these horny yaks. What's going on? And they realized they were munching on these little cordyceps mushrooms. And so they brought them down to the village and they gave them to the monks in the village and the medicine men in the village. And they're like, what are these doing? And they started experimenting with them and realized that it helped them oxygenate the bloodstream. So it can bring up to 15% increase in our VO2 max. So without being a stimulant, right, like a caffeine or a direct stimulant, it's giving us a sense of energy, of endurance. It's one of the few mushrooms you can really feel within like 15, 20 minutes of ingesting it. And so the Sherpas started taking it and they're like, hey, we can hike to higher altitudes easier, right, where the oxygen gets thinner. I used to live in Colorado at 7,000 feet elevation. When I'd have family come from sea level, the first thing I would give them is some cordyceps tea. It's like, we're going hiking, try this. And 30 minutes later, they had such a better ability to take in deep breaths. I used to use it with asthmatic clients. And so pre and post workout, we find it's a really effective a way to support athletic performance.
That is so cool.
And I think to build on what Danielle said, this is actually a good segue to one of your first questions about the non-specific nature and how that's very heady and confusing, right? Mm-hmm. So the body has, by and large, 11 main systems, and the systems are like symphonies of things working together, but they all are trying to play the same song, but there's many instruments. So digestive system, circulatory system, endocrine system, skeletal system. So they're playing their own song, but they're a harmony. And when we say that adaptogens are non-specific and they help these symphonies play better, right? It's confusing, but let's take the example of cordyceps. What if your VO2 max increases 15%? So your oxygen intake increases, let's say even 5%. Mm-hmm. So how do you feel? Like what will happen is multiple parts of your body will function better. Yes, libido might increase. Yes, athletic performance might increase, but also your ability to handle stress will improve. The other part is one study around cordyceps on ATP production. So basically cellular energy. And there was an up to a 50% improvement in basically how we produce energy in our cells. And you might have heard of mitochondria and these ancient little creatures living in our body. But basically, imagine if your cells produce energy more efficiently, how that would impact multiple of these 11 body systems. So that's an example why and how these adaptogens are Swiss Army knives, is because they work on these systematic things versus a sniper rifle that is just trying to shut or turn on a certain neurotransmitter. And instead, they're trying to lubricate the symphony or play it better, and therefore you will have multiple benefits. And for example, a product that is an athletic product, an upper, as we Western like to think of in these binary ways, an upper for energy and libido is actually, imagine if you have more oxygen in your lungs, you will sleep better. And there's plenty of studies of that, of like blood oxygenation impact on deep sleep, yada, yada, yada. So I think that's a good kind of example on how all these adaptogens work.
Phenomenal analogy. And when you start talking about mitochondria, then you have my number, because it is, speaking of brain health and gut health, I think when we talk about longevity, we're looking at mitochondrial health, and we're looking at, mitophagy and what's happening there, and our ability to keep our organs totally functioning and healthy. So super cool and a great example. All right, number 5.
All right, number 5 is turkey tail. Such a interesting, really, really cool mushroom. It grows all over the world. It's probably the most popular. If you were to hike in a forest anywhere across the planet, you would see turkey tail. We have a lot of it in LA. You can go turkey tail foraging. And there's a couple unique things about turkey tail. The immune activity is really what the majority of the research is around. So there's a really cool compound. It's called polysaccharide K that was discovered in turkey tail that was actually turned into a drug called crustin, which was the first anti-cancer mushroom drug in Japan. So really amazing benefits with the immune system. We really talk about it in terms of gut health, which of course you can't really separate immune health and gut health. 70% of our immune cells are in our gut. So when we're talking about, the foundation of our bodies, it's so interrelated. We're supporting our gut. Turkey tail specifically has identified prebiotics. So really, I think this, it's so exciting to hear more about prebiotics. When we talk about these adaptogens, it's like, how can we get to the root of what's going on in our system, right? When not Band-Aids, but really let's heal us from the foundation. And as an herbalist and nutritionist, that's often the gut. And I like to think of probiotics for like replenishing the pond with fish every day. And these prebiotics are actually maintaining a healthy micro or mycobiome, as Tero likes to call it. So we have this kind of dual activity of gut health, immunity with turkey tail, which of course leads to so many other benefits, right? It's like with these adaptogens, you might start taking turkey tail because you're looking for an improvement in your gut health. And then you start noticing you're actually thinking clearer, right? Or you're sleeping deeper, or you haven't gotten sick at that change of season like you're used to in previous years. And this happens with each of the 5 mushrooms. So this is really a starting point. And it's so funny. We like talk about the specific benefits. It's like part of what makes these magic is you can maybe use lion's mane because you want to improve brain function. And then there can be several other kind of secondary benefits that begin to follow the longer and longer you take them.
For the record, that's not, microbiome is not my word. There's decades of research from people much more credible than I am around it. But it is an important point to understand that even if, let's say your husband doesn't want to drink the mushroom coffee,
He drinks
there
it.
is, well, probably thanks to you, right?
Yeah, but I get it. Yeah.
We have fungi in our skin and our gut. So even if you never take any mushroom or mushroom products, you will have mushrooms on your body. Similarly, bacteria and fungi are kind of living together, and there's actually a lot of synergies, how wherever you find bacteria, you tend to find fungi and vice versa. So they're in our gut, and some of them are good for you, some of them are bad for you. So fungi and animals actually share common ancestries a long time ago, and we still share up to 50% of the same DNA. Which the good news is this fungal medicine is super bioavailable, and up to like half of the best-selling drugs, many of them are immunosuppressants, utilize fungi in their technology. Penicillin would be the most famous one, but a lot of immunosuppressants, billion-dollar drugs. But so we can use fungal medicine more efficiently because they're similar to us, but we're also very prone to fungal diseases, and bad fungi, candida would be one that many people know about. So if you're not consuming good fungi, you're more likely to have bad fungi in your body that can then lead to other issues down the road. So consuming good fungi is critical. And if you take this approach that I don't want any mushrooms in my life, I sorry to break it to you, but you're consuming it every day in the air, in bread, wine, cheese. Okay, you don't have any of those, any fermented products, sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha, whatever. Air dried meats will have fungi. And so if somebody's like, oh, I only eat meat and I'm carnivore, I sorry to break it to you, but you also consume fungi. So fungi and bacteria are these like invisible heroes or enemies, depending if you have the good or the bad, that are impacting our lives. But because they're not visible and are previous generations didn't have the tools to search them and research them. It's only now in the last 30, 40, 50 years that are really trying to fully understand how particularly these invisible bacteria and fungi impacting our health in so many different ways, in many ways more than the visible things impacting our health.
Yeah, obviously we've seen a surge in SIBO diagnoses and now fungal overgrowths as well, looking for that in the gut. And obviously, as you just stated, we're ingesting it whether we want to or not. So the stuff that we're ingesting that we know nothing about, we can push that to the side. But what about the stuff, now that it's become so popular, like taking adaptogens, drinking mushrooms? I always, especially after 2 pregnancies and breastfeeding, I care a lot about sourcing. I care a lot about research, and I'm a minimalist when it comes to what I ingest. And so the safety profile is really wonderful, makes me feel calm. But I'm curious if you could explain, like, where's the majority of research happening when it comes to the adaptogens, and where is the majority of the sourcing happening? Where is it coming from? Are there any warnings that would ever be on adaptogens, or any type of like powders or teas that we would be able to get? Obviously, Four Sigmatic, you provide a number of those, but I'm just, being that it's Greek to me, like, where do you even source something like this?
Sure. Let me just quickly say a little umbrella, and then Danielle, who's a registered herbalist, can comment on some of the things to keep in mind, because there is individuality in place as well. So where do adaptogens come from? They come from every part of the world, from South America to Africa to Asia to Scandinavia to North America. There's multiple living here in the US. That being said, the most common areas are Ayurveda and TCM. That does not mean they're better than, let's say, the Amazonian herbal system. They're just better documented. The Chinese and the Indian systems have been recording and writing things for a long time. And in order to qualify as an adaptogen, you have to have enough credible research. So maybe in 10, 20 years, we have enough research of pau d'arco or suma root from the Amazon. But so there's like about 8, I think, that would be classified as Ayurvedic or TCM, but it's pretty diverse. And then a second part is, I think your concern is super valid. There's a research that was studied, I believe, in 2019 in Science, which is one of the more credible scientific journals, around a USB study. So meaning they were studying the actual compounds found in supplements. It was a Reishi US supplement study. So they studied Reishi, which we said was the queen of the mushrooms and the most studied one, supplements sold in the US, and found that 74% of the Reishi supplements sold in the US contain no Reishi mushroom. 74%. So that's a valid concern, especially with the supplement industry. And it's legit. So do you even know what you're getting? Are you getting the right form? Is it bioavailable? Are you getting enough of it? Or is it one of these products which says that it has 80 of these things in a small scoop, which is, you're just not getting as much as in those research papers. So in the book, we break down, like, according to the studies, what does the study say? Like, how much in this study from Nagano they took this thing? How much in this study from San Francisco they took this thing? And how does that impact? But that being said, there is some safety things you need to keep in mind for your personal thing, for your body types. I'll let Danielle kind of comment on that, because even though they're safe, like carrots are safe, I don't do well with carrots, especially raw. So it doesn't mean that even though they're safe and they're good for you, that you have to eat them. So there is a couple things to keep in mind. So maybe Danielle can comment on some of our body types and constitutions.
Yeah, there's so much I want to share here. Oh my gosh, there's like many things to touch on. But first, from the previous, like, good fungi, bad fungi, I just wanted to clear the air that these 5 functional mushrooms are actually antifungal. So there's a ton of really great research with reishi, for example, fighting candida. People are like, wait, a fungus fighting a fungus? But we're like, in the animal kingdom, animals fight animals all the time. So these are actually really antifungal if you are dealing with a fungal infection, right? So that's the first thing. Sourcing, so important. And you're talking about, cleanliness and the quality. Our mushrooms are bioaccumulators, so they absorb a lot from the medium, or with mushrooms we call it the substrate that they're growing from. So really, like, organic is almost the first line of defense with functional fungi, but furthermore they should be third party tested, so they're tested in another laboratory, and we do this with every single Four Sigmatic mushroom for things like mycotoxins, radiation, heavy metals, pesticides, herbicides, right, to make sure that if you're getting a true mushroom, you actually want to make sure it's supporting your system and not bringing you in the opposite direction. And then let me just clarify, Tero mentioned 74% of these reishi products had no reishi. Like, how could that be? So with all of our mushrooms, there's really three big things we need to look out for beyond the organic and third party tested, which comes with the quality. But we have to, if you're going to spend money on supplements, it's like the most expensive supplement is the one that doesn't work. And so with all of our mushrooms, you actually have to get the real mushroom. This might sound weird, but there's a huge market for just mycelium, which is like the root system. It's a lot cheaper and more efficient to grow that, but getting the real mushroom, this is what our ancestors have been using for thousands of years. It's the only part accessible out in nature. I think of it as like the offering of the mushroom. Like, this is the part where we're giving you to see and to offer, and where the medicine is. So getting that real mushroom, it's called the fruiting body. It's like the apple on the tree. The second thing is these mushrooms, you can tell your husband this, Kelly, these functional mushrooms, they primarily grow on trees, on wood out in nature, which is different from most culinary mushrooms, poisonous mushrooms, psychedelic varieties, which are growing from the earth. Most of these grow from trees. And Tero mentioned that we share a large percentage, about 50% of our DNA with these mushrooms. And one piece of that similarity is that we need external nutrients in order to thrive and evolve. And this fungi do as humans do. So fungi can't photosynthesize, they can't turn sunlight into sugars, they need an external bath of nutrients. And so where they're growing from is critical. It's what they are, what they eat. Right. So we talked about chaga earlier being full of all these antioxidants. One of these most studied antioxidants is betalainic acid, which comes from betalain, a conversion of this betalain found in the bark of the birch tree. So really, these have to be growing on woods, on the substrates they evolved to grow on. And so getting like true wild harvested mushrooms, or mushrooms that are grown on woods, is so critical versus, and I'm making a point of this because a lot of the industry is growing mushrooms on like cheap grain, like oat and soy and rice. And I think of that like the meat industry. It's like, people know that if you get a grass-fed free range beef, it's going to be a lot different in its nutrient capacity than, a CAFO, like soy-fed animal. Same thing with our mushrooms, and especially when we get them in nature, they develop compounds in nature because they're exposed to stressors in nature. This idea of xenohormesis. It's like they develop polyphenols when there's these big temperature fluctuations, or the environment that they're growing in is giving them as stressors. They have to develop these compounds to protect themselves and defend themselves and strengthen themselves. And those are often the compounds that give us their medicine. And so important and so different when we're getting like real mushrooms grown on wood than the mushrooms grown in a laboratory environment. I know this is a tangent, but the third really critical thing, because I want people to get the benefits when they're buying mushrooms.
No, I wish people could see my face. I'm smiling and nodding, and I'm like, yes. Like, this is the kind of stuff where you want to pull the veil back, because, and this is why I was excited to have you on the show, is because it's stuff like this. Like, the last thing I want is someone hearing that they should take reishi from me and walking into CVS and seeing a bag on the shelf and buying it and getting no benefit from it. Meanwhile, like, potentially, like, it's being grown on some kind of poor quality industrially raised crop that potentially could have been sprayed. Like, I just go down a rabbit hole, like safety and efficacy, and give me the benefits, not the marketing. You know what I mean?
Totally. I mean, I learned this the hard way. Some of my clients were like, I'm already taking, you recommended ratio, I'm taking it. And they were actually getting worse. I'm like, what's going on? And it turns out that they were just taking a mycelium product, like one of these 74% of the products out there that was actually growing on an allergen of theirs. Like a patient with celiac that was getting a reishi mycelium grown on a wheat berry that they were then consuming, and all they were eating was like ground up wheat, 90% of that wheat with like a little bit of mushroom roots on it. I'm like, this is insane. And so, yeah, really knowing what you're getting is huge. And boiling it down is like, okay, the real mushroom, it shouldn't use, there's all these other words like stolen from cannabis industry, like full spectrum. And we see primordium and mycelium. It's like, they're all marketing jargon to avoid the fact that you're not actually getting the real mushroom. So like you get the real mushroom, you get it on a log grown substrate, wood grown for the most of these species. And the third point is they have to be extracted. This is so huge. Like people adding raw powdered like chaga in coffee shops, you'll see like chagachinos and adding a scoop in smoothies. And if the mushrooms haven't been extracted, our bodies actually can't utilize all of these amazing compounds in them. So there's a compound locked in the cell wall of these mushrooms. It's called chitin, same compound found in crustaceans. So think of crab shells or lobster shells or shrimp shells. If we ingest the mushroom, it's not been extracted, it acts as an insoluble fiber. Not bad, right? But think of it like more like eating a kale stem. Yeah. You have this rush in your intestine, as opposed to extraction means that the mushroom, the cell wall, this chitin has been broken. That happens through long hot water, so a high heat boil, it's called a decoction, or through ethanol, through an alcohol extract. And both of those are kind of the two tried and true methods to breaking the chitin and releasing these compounds so they're bioavailable. And if you're getting those three, like that's kind of the first, and then there's all like dosing and different things that we make it easy to get and reference in the book. But with mushroom supplements, like those three things are critical, and that's kind of the first steps you should take to make sure that you're spending your money wisely and actually getting the amazing benefits that they can offer.
So just out of curiosity, Tero, this question is now for you. When it comes to extracting your mushrooms and putting them into like the ready to drink cacao drinks and the chai, and is it like extracted and then powdered, or how is it coming together, and how did you find the right places to be able to provide you with the right kind of mushrooms?
Question. It is extracted. It's not just extracted one way, it's extracted double. So there are two kinds of compounds in these fungi specifically. There are water-soluble compounds. Those are the ones, the beta-glucans that Danielle mentioned. Those you can cook out. And then there's non-water soluble compounds, particularly mushrooms like reishi and chaga, that usually require lipid and acid and alcohol more commonly. So you might have seen in the past like mushroom products that are capsules. They tended to be hot water extracted. Mm-hmm. And there's a powder inside the capsule. And then there's a tincture that was more of adaptogenic property. So when Four Sigmatic started, we went through a multiple like first 5-6 years of like supply chain hoops, because like we wanted to use wild mushrooms, or at least in few of the species. So how do we make a wild product organic? That was a 4-year headache, not easy. Mm-hmm. And then we wanted to do dual extraction. So we wanted to combine these two products into one. But basically, using the meat anecdote to what Danielle said is like, yeah, if you buy a sausage and it says it's beef, you kind of want it to be beef, right? You don't want it to be another animal like a horse. Like, I'm serious. And then secondly, you kind of want the product to be grass-fed or ethically raised. So in this case, you kind of want it to be log grown. And then finally, using maybe collagen as an example, you gotta have to cook it for an extended time period, this decoction process. So think of like animal hide or bones, like you gotta cook it for literally, like in the case of chaga, like 12, 24, 36 hours. And then you get it's usually a liquid extract, and then you spray dry it. With plants, you have to use a binder like a maltodextrin that pretty much nobody discloses in the supplement industry. if it's good, it's 5% maltodextrin, 95% true stuff. In some cases, I've seen 95% maltodextrin. And with fungi, it's so fibrous because they're inedible mushrooms. You can spray it back into the mushroom fiber, which is, you don't need a carrier. But again, some brands use a carrier because it's like easier. But basically, like you take a pot, but just commercial scale, and you with high heat and pressure blow it out, and you can make it into a powder with a fiber. So you kind of blow it back into the fiber, and that's what's in the reishi cacao and chai latte. So when you pour hot water, A, it's bioavailable immediately, and B, with the fungi, the hot heat does not destroy the nutrients, unlike, let's say, vitamin C could have been destroyed in high heat.
That's so fascinating. And I'm so thankful that you did the hard work, because it just makes it easy. I wouldn't have probably incorporated them outside of in pill form from a functional MD, prior maybe to our meeting in 2014, when I met your co-founder or business, I guess. Was he just working for you at the time? But either way.
Founding member, his name is Marcus. He was our marketing guy.
He was so nice.
He is super nice. Still works with us, but it was funny. He was so nervous about meeting you, and he skated from Venice Beach to the west side of LA because he wanted to like get his body moving. So I think he came with a skateboard, and then he skated so long around LA that he had like a cramp in his calf. So.
Well, at the time, it was just so nice because I was equally as excited to meet him. Like, I wanted to know all about this. I love when my paths cross with someone who can educate me in something that I had know nothing about. And so I'm just really obviously thankful for everything that you guys have done and what you've built. But really, it's like the science behind it that's so exciting for me. What about, other than fungi, what about the other herbs and roots that are considered adaptogens? What are some of your favorites, and are they in the same way as fungi are safe and you can have as many as you want? Like, could I start my day with my lion's mane, which I'm already doing, and my day with a reishi instant kind of tea? Can I just take these all day? Is there a time of day?
Yeah, and they are very versatile, like we talked before. And I still recommend some cadence because for most people, how their method of action is slightly more suitable for different times of the day. One of the absolute first adaptogens ever studied, Tero, often known as a Siberian ginseng, but it's technically an incorrect word because it's not a ginseng. But that's one of the most underrated. It's one of the most studied and most versatile, and one of the original, but nobody really talks about it. But it's an amazing adaptogen. Great studies on like cardiovascular health, cognitive health, and even immunity, but particularly used for circulatory system and cognitive system. So that's an amazing in the morning. In the afternoon, we talked about rhodiola. That's kind of the Nordic ginseng. Again, it's not a ginseng. It's something I grew up with. It's one of the only foods in the European Union where you can make a health claim out of a natural product, and the health claim that it supports with cognitive function. It's also used for athletic performance, but it is an amazing kind of vitality, brain power herb. And then if I'd say a third one, kind of evening, ashwagandha that you mentioned is one of the more popular ones. It is actually so popular that I found out that on Google search volumes, it surpassed green juice as a search volume. And what makes that extra special is it's hard to spell. So if that many people are searching for it, it's really helping. So there's amazing studies, particularly on specific extracts of ashwagandha, like KSM-66 or sensoril for cognitive function. But what it's most known for, it's for the HPA axis and calming our endocrine system. So I would recommend it mostly in the evening or when you're high stress situation. So Eleuthero for morning, rhodiola afternoon, ashwagandha in the evening would be kind of some guidance. But if you take ashwagandha in the morning, it's not a bad thing. But maybe Danielle, as an herbalist, can comment on some of your favorite herb adaptogens as well.
There's so many. This question's like, pick your favorite child. Like every day it's different. But yeah, they're all so unique and relevant for different purposes. And we didn't get to this too much today, but in the book we talk a lot about bio individuality, which is really important to me as an herbalist, and understanding your body type. This has been it's really rare that we don't do this anymore in the West, but in pretty much all other major systems of medicine, TCM being the second largest, Ayurveda the third, and then folk medicine all over the world recognizes that not all bodies are the same. So they don't treat, if we all three had a headache, we would all have a different herbal formula or even a different single herb to meld with our body type. And this is the same with all plant medicine, including adaptogens. So that could be a way if, in the book, we're like, wait, these are all great for stress and mood. Which one do I choose? We actually have an energetics of each adaptogen. So if like your body, for me, I'm very pitta, I'm very warm, fiery personality. So the more warming roots or warming spices actually are not great for me. So I actually turn towards cooler ingredients, even if the benefit might be similar. So that's a recommendation. I guess people are always like, but where do I start? I'll make a plug for two right now that we haven't mentioned. The first being Tulsi or holy basil. I love Tulsi so much. Spending a lot of my life in studying Ayurveda in India, Tulsi grows so abundantly. I love herbs that are abundant, right? There's like, clearly nature is saying like, take me off, like use me as much as you can. And it's a mint, it's a Lamiaceae, the mint family. So it grows wild. It's called a tridoshic herb. So the three body types in Ayurveda are doshas, and Tulsi is balancing to all three body types. So if you're like, this is over my head, I don't know my body type, I just want to start with an adaptogen, Tulsi is a really safe, effective place to begin. And then also cacao. We use cacao, like Tero mentioned, we have a reishi hot chocolate, you can take in the evening. Cacao is actually an adaptogen itself as well. When you actually are using cacao, right, from the Theobroma cacao tree, cocoa and cacao, very different based on how they're processed, but the cacao bean itself is actually the single most phytochemically complex food on the planet, this bean. So incredible in the non-specific activity, incredible source of magnesium, which I'm obsessed with as a nutritionist, and with the stressors that people are dealing with. We all need so much magnesium. And it's just such an amazing bitter. That bitter flavor is so important for detoxification and liver function. There's so much going on with cacao. So yeah, Tulsi and cacao, if you're like, I just don't know where to start, would be my recommendations today.
I love that. And I think you're making everyone tuning in want to go eat some chocolate too. Oh my gosh, you guys. Well, I could talk to you all day because I think this is just a really interesting topic that feels confusing and overwhelming for a lot of people. And they may have, I'm sure they've heard of Four Sigmatic, and you make it so easy for people to try, but to have the science behind it and the why and the sourcing and the safety, like it makes us all feel a lot better and more excited about incorporating it whenever we can, especially, just the little things you mentioned, like whether that's an increase in VO2 max or an increased antioxidant levels. Like these are the kind of things that make me go, oh, I'm going to add that to my day. And I love to add. It's don't tell me to restrict or subtract. I'm all about what benefits is that? Okay, great. Let's put it on the plate. Let's put it in the cup. And so that's what I want people tuning in to hear, is that they can get out there and add to their plate and add to their day and really, allow their body to do what it was meant to do. So thank you for explaining all of that. Thank you for writing your new book together, Healing Adaptogens. It truly is a textbook. But in a very approachable way, just like today was. So thank you for that. Where can people follow along? Where can they buy the book? Where can they learn more? This was a pleasure. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been so much fun. We love talking about mushrooms and plants and could totally keep going. I give 3-hour lectures typically, so I'm like, let's keep going. No, but the book we
don't
have
offer.
Yeah, right. For the book, it has its own website, healingadaptogens.com. And the book's available everywhere books are sold. So Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can check out all the links are on that website. You can find a lot more of Tero and I at foursigmatic.com. We have a free mushroom academy on there with little videos you can go and watch. We're at Four Sigmatic on all social channels. And then I can also be found at Danielle Ryan Broida. Tero is at I am Tero. He only has Instagram. So if you want to follow up, that's your one option. What I miss, Tero.
Thanks for having us on. And if you're listening to this, I hope you just take one nugget and take it with you, whatever it is. Yeah, even if it's not an adaptogen related. And hopefully this was helpful.
Super helpful. Makes me also really excited to take in some more cordyceps. I don't know why I thought they were like the redheaded stepchild, but now they're like a superhero.
They're so cool. Let us know how you feel.
Yeah, exactly. I think if you're breastfeeding as a mom, even if it's safe to take something that's very energizing, sometimes moms, like my wife with our two young ones and breastfeeding, they're more drawn to the calming rishis of the world. But sometimes you need a little like natural pick-me-up. So it's good for those days.
Yeah. Well, I have been incorporating reishi. I mean, this is my personal decision. I'm ingesting, consult your doctor and your OB if you feel the need. I personally have been taking the cacao and the chai at night. It's very nice. But it makes all the sense in the world as to why. So thanks for sharing all the science, you guys. I really appreciate it. And I will throw links to everything in the show notes. And if I can find, I know I have an affiliate somewhere. If I find my code, I will throw it in the intro. So go back and listen to that. I'm sure I'll throw it in there. All right. Thanks, guys.